I've seen quite widespread coverage over here, although I heard that one TV network last night led the evening news with a meeting between Donald Trump and Kanye West, which I think is frankly embarrassing. This is the worst humanitarian crisis of the 20th century, and it's the first where we're watching the victims of systematic, widespread war crimes essentially live tweeting their extermination. The UN, is unable to do anything at a political level. There's few avenues to justice. In fact, at the moment, the International Criminal Court, which was founded with the intention of serving as a deterrent for widespread war crimes worldwide, given that perpetrators can be arrested anywhere in the world, in theory, the International Criminal Court is totally useless in this scenario because international criminal law is a relatively new and fragile endeavor, and to a disturbing extent, its application is contingent on geopolitics. So Syria is not party to the ICC because it never ratified the Rome Statute, the founding document. And as a result, the only way for the ICC to investigate crimes in Syria, not just by the Syrian government, which is the most prolific perpetrator, but also by rebel groups and by the Islamic State, would be for the UN Security Council to refer jurisdiction, which Russia blocked as a measure in 2014 with its veto power. And so essentially now what we're seeing is Russia is now actively participating in the perpetration of war crimes in Aleppo, and the only way for the ICC to get jurisdiction would be for Russia to refer itself to the ICC, which is never going to happen. So this is really calling into question the entire credibility of the court, the credibility of the UN, and the values that supposedly underline those institutions.
Right. So
not even the ICC, even the Geneva Conventions require parties in war, such as Russia and Syria, to safeguard as much as they can the lives of civilians. And you have this grotesque situation right now where they're essentially holding these civilians hostage in order to get other concessions. I mean, it's beyond just the ICC and the latest sort of innovations in international law. This goes back to the basic rules of war that prevent it from falling into all-out savagery.
Exactly. And in fact, what we're seeing is, in the absence of any jurisdiction, was Syria is existing essentially as a vacuum of morality and also as a vacuum of the application of international law. We're seeing that the Rome Statute, the founding document of the ICC, is essentially being used not as a list of prohibitions for conduct, but as a manual for how most efficiently to carry out the military campaign and to humiliate and destroy not only the opposition, but civilians living within its territory.
But gentlemen, before we talk about justice, let's just talk about saving the lives that are still there in East Aleppo. There have been these calls to have UN monitors come in so that civilians don't get ethnically cleansed. What are the chances of that happening?
Well, in June...
I'll answer.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, in June... okay.
Well, I think the chances are rather slim at this point, just because of the rather dangerous situation. If viewers recall the UN convoy in recent months that was delivering aid to cities of northern Syria was egregiously bombed by Russian forces, who later denied that they did this. So I don't think that any UN forces are going to be stepping into such a very dangerous situation for them. I don't think UN rules would allow that.
Ben Taub?
Yeah, I completely agree. I would add that in June, when a neighborhood called Madaya was being starved, the UN said that if the Syrian government continued to refuse the UN deliveries of food and medicine to areas under siege where people were being starved to death, which is literally the crime of extermination in the Rome Statute, then they would start doing airdrops to these civilian areas of food and medicine, which never happened. They never followed through on that. Furthermore, the reason that there are people who are starving and suffering under siege with no access to medical care is because the UN will only go into areas to make aid deliveries if the Syrian government gives its permission to do so, which of course is not happening almost all of the time. So, which, as I said, is the crime of extermination. So at a certain point, you have to ask the question, at what point is the abstention of enforcing these international laws creating an environment of impunity first, but also of complicity, where the UN is almost, by its inaction, participating in this crime of extermination.